Hello and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise, a podcast about living with ME and chronic illness, creativity and making meaning. I'm joined today by Hollie-Anne Brooks, an award-winning freelance journalist and person with ME. Holly has a Substack blog called Slow Living with ME, and I'll put a link in for that later. She's published in The Times, The Metro, Cosmopolitan and Women's Health, amongst other things, over here in the UK. And she's also a Sunderland fan, so we've got that in common as well. So,
We do,
or
sadly.
unfortunately, I don't know. It's it's a
Yeah.
good thing. um,
Yeah, it's taking up a lot of my energy right now.
yeah. um, so yeah, the reason why sort of I asked Holly to come on was she had an article published by Digital Spy called "Why Dragon's Den's Latest Episode Was So Damaging," and we're sort of going to get into this whole issue that's impacted the ME community in the UK in a big way over the last week, week in one day. Yeah, I think it might be useful to kind of go through the timeline of events, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation about things like holistic therapies, ethical practices, and also sort of the role of the BBC as well in the whole kind of series of events, but and also kind of the wider issues about how ME is perceived in society and generally kind of how the wider public that don't have an understanding of ME kind of can be impacted by these big stories and events in the media. So for those who maybe like international views, do you want to give us, Holly-Anne, sort of given sort of like your brilliant article that you got out really quickly after this TV program was aired? Do you want to tell us a bit about Dragon's Den, the actual kind of pitch, what the program was about, and the segment, and kind of about ear seeds, because that's the kind of
Yeah,
the crux of the matter is we're talking about a holistic therapy that's not had kind of it's not got sort of medical backing as such. I'm trying to
yeah.
find my own words because I'm tired this
The
evening,
brain fog for you.
but yeah, if you could tell us a little bit about the sort of the program and what occurred on it.
Yeah, so I think a lot, or if not all listeners, will be familiar with the concept of Dragon's Den, where you have, at least in the UK, these exceptionally well-known celebrity entrepreneurs, people come along and they pitch their business for investment. And what we saw in the UK recently was an episode which featured a young entrepreneur called Giselle Boxer who was promoting a product that she called AccuSeeds. AccuSeeds are essentially little stickers that you pop on different pressure points on your ears, um, and they are widely known in traditional Chinese medicine. People use them for varying reasons, and I'm sure we'll get into that. Um, but essentially, what happened is Giselle led the entire pitch by heavily, and I can't stress that enough, alluding to the fact that her product, these ear seeds, um, cured her ME. And as we all know, there is no cure for ME. There is absolutely no scientific research, particularly into what are essentially ear stickers, uh, curing curing this horrific illness. Um, but that didn't cut the dragons off. And what we saw was there were six dragons. They had kind of a special guest in Topple, Gary Neville, who was on there as well. And they all, let's be real, fell for it. There was no questioning, or if there was, it was taken out in post production of going, what's the science behind this? How many people have you researched? How many doctors endorse these acupressure
Mm.
seeds? Um, so what was broadcast to literally millions of viewers was a segment where vulnerable people are being preyed on, where she's making 100% profit. She's getting £50,000 worth of investment from a man who has millions of followers on social media. And people are being duped into thinking, yeah, we can cure these illnesses like ME, like chronic fatigue syndrome, like long COVID by whacking a sticker on our ears. And there'll be certain, particularly females of my age who kind of grew up in the 90s who will remember we had these like little stick-on earrings,
Mm.
kind of before you would like when you were too young to have your ears pierced. And they look a lot more stylish than Giselle's product. And B, they didn't cure me of ME back then, and certainly have had no long lasting effects. So
Mm. Um, yeah, so these are kind of like acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine sort of things that you sort of stick on your ear, and they're supposed to sort of like hit certain nerves that are supposed to then help kind of different things. So there's almost like a diagram, isn't there, that's sort of
yeah,
like that's sort of been gone around social media, sort of showing, well, if you put it on this part of your ear, it's good for this symptom, or this part of your ear, it's good for another symptom. But um, I think what and I don't feel like I've got the sort of knowledge to kind of like critique acupuncture or traditional Chinese medicine, but what what I have read over the last week is that for acupuncture as a wider sort of practice, there have been studies that have shown that it can help in certain issues, but what the big, like you said, the big sort of talking point was, or the crux of the matter is that she used the words that it aided her recovery, and that's where the issue is, because there's an inference, and a very strong inference, that this can help with ME, um, and almost help kind of recover. And she said it aided her recovery, so therefore there's an insinuation that there's an element that actually it's not about symptom kind of alleviation, but it's
mm,
also about recovery, and that's a very the word recovery is a very strong and sort of strong word that brings about a lot of feelings that can impact people in a very negative way when we're talking about ME, because there isn't any treatment at the minute that's
no,
seen to any sort of treatments that there are out there for ME are things that kind of help alleviate symptoms, aren't they? And
yeah.
that's the big issue.
And I think I've had acupuncture. I think it was kind of maybe the end of 2022 into 2023. It wasn't really to do with having ME. It was potentially I was curious, you know. So I had quite a few sessions with a brilliant man who studied for something like 4 years. So this is,
Mm,
a full-time case of studying, essentially going to get a degree in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And he used these on me. He didn't charge me any extra, as part of the session. And did it cure me? Absolutely not, at
mm,
all. Was that 45 minutes while I was in that session really relaxing? Personally, yes, for me, and that's always a nice feeling. But I think what we're kind of not really discussing, or what Giselle and the Dragons didn't discuss, was the fact that for some people, going to have acupuncture, even putting an acupressure seed on a particular part of your body, will have a massively negative effect on your IME, because ME is completely different from pretty much one patient to the next. The
mm,
severity of symptoms, how long symptoms will last, what causes post-exertional malaise in one person won't necessarily cause it in another, right? So for me, something like going to get my nails done every 3 weeks, or if I treat myself to a massage a couple of times a year, it's just brilliant for my mental health. But for somebody else, that might really trigger a deep period of crashing, because the physical aspect of something like that just doesn't work for their brain and their body.
mm. So yeah, we this episode aired on Thursday, the 18th of January, and then you got to work pretty quickly, I think, on it, didn't you? I guess some of us were aware that this episode was coming out. The ME charities kind of said we're aware that this is going to be on the TV, so um, a lot of people were kind of like what sort of watching. I didn't personally watch it. I watched clips afterwards, but I think whenever we talk about ME and ME's in the media, for many of us with ME, it raises kind of feelings that are really difficult to deal with, doesn't it? In terms of what's going to be said, how is ME going to be portrayed, and usually any sort of coverage kind of falls on a positive side in terms of the reality of ME, or
Mm.
a negative side in terms of the psychologization and talking about graded exercise or cognitive behavioral therapy or
Yeah.
think yourself better. And this very much kind of like falls into this category of an element of belief, that the belief that this treatment's going to help you, and if you believe it's going to help you, um, then it will, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
there's been a lot of fallout in terms of the individual Giselle Boxer who went on the program, and there's an element of her story having changed a little bit, or kind of a bit of grey area in terms of how she recovered and how long she was ill for. And we don't want to get too into too much detail about kind of like talking personally around her issues,
Mm.
because if she said she was diagnosed with ME, then we kind of have to
Yeah.
take that. But then I think my biggest issue is that um, that comes with this sort of like almost like a new age thinking around kind of like belief, and she actually I've seen a screenshot that said that she'd actually said that there are so many women who now believe that they will never get better and therefore they never will. So somebody was sort of saying on Twitter, well, what is it? Is it the ear seeds that help, or is it the
Yeah.
belief in them?
Or the
In which
belief.
case, do
Yeah.
we need the ear seeds? Do we just need to
Yeah.
believe that we're going to get
Yeah. Or are
better?
you
So
going to charge me, £30 for my own self-belief?
yeah.
I think, yeah, I will be the first to admit that a lot of my friends and family would call me, slightly chaotic hippie of sorts. Because I like, the kind of slightly aesthetic witchy side of things. I'll pop a crystal out. Do I actually
Yeah.
believe in anything? I don't think I do, but I kind of like the idea of it, right? And I'll burn a bit of incense and
Mm.
meditate and drink my blue lotus tea and all of those sort of very silly things. I think that stems from my love of the 1970s, right? And wishing that
Mm.
I was around at that time. But I think, yeah, the concept of it coming back to this idea that you can believe away so many Giselle things, so many women, and I thought it was quite poignant. She'd said women as well.
Mm.
Why is this not so on men recovering because they believe, is it a woman thing? I thought was quite, yeah, she didn't strike me as a girl's girl on that front. Um, and I think what's happened over the last time that we're talking, kind of 8 days, has been utterly incredible from the ME community online and those, not on social media, but still submitting things like their complaints letters behind the scenes. But it is so tiring. So we have been literally bombarded for 8 days with the fallout from this, with the ups and downs, with the roller coaster.
Mm.
And as I mentioned in my newsletter edition that went out this morning, was actually
Mm.
if we're supposed to rest and get better and recover, we need society to stop doing stupid things that are gonna push us further back. Like when I think about the literal hours, the days that collectively, there are thousands of us who've been impacted by this Dragon's Den episode in a negative way. When I think about the amount of time and energy we've all used to, like I said, in my case, write an article to my job, I'm a journalist, but also just to be discussing this on social media, or even just to sit with the feelings of, oh, this woman essentially thinks I'm not trying hard enough, or this, let's be real, quite attractive, seemingly successful woman that Giselle is telling me that if I just put these seeds on and spend time, like all of those emotions are feeding into us, and that's exhausting. And there are highlights, I think, to the Dragon's Den episode, and I use the word like fallout from that. I think where hopefully, and I'm always hopeful, seeing a bit of a silver lining to that. But we don't need that, right? We didn't
Mm,
ask to for any of this. I think when you have a disability, when you have a chronic illness, you are always fighting a battle, and whether you are somebody who kind of lets the news wash over you, or you can't engage with it because your ME is kind of at a particularly level of severity, or whether you're somebody who is essentially on the trenches, going out there campaigning, doing incredible work like you are, then I think, either way, it's really draining.
mm,
And I think that's also something that hasn't really been discussed is this kind of as the headline in my digital spy article was, these are the reasons why it's so damaging. And it's not just damaging on a societal level, on a media representation level, on, a what the standards of the British Broadcasting Company are. It's also just, yeah, like I said, we didn't ask for this to come at
mm,
us. We could be using time and
mm.
effort so in much better spaces.
I think another point that would be good to discuss would be, like you said, the role of the BBC in the whole debacle. And I think as an Emmy community, we don't feel that the BBC's really ever supported or advocated for an accurate representation of Emmy within the media. Other publications and organisations maybe are more positive, or but certainly there's never been a feeling that the Emmy Association, sorry, the BBC, that's my brain fog. The BBC have kind of taken hold of ME as a condition, and actually done anything positive over the years to 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 rectify the public
Mm,
perception of the condition. Um, but also what as things kind of the timeline of events, your article came out over the weekend, and then the Action for ME and the ME Association and a number of other ME organisations sort of signed a joint letter that went to MPs, and they were really good statements that happened kind of at the beginning of the weekend, and then sort of media coverage started picking it up, which was great. So there's been articles all over the place with the Sun, the Times, the Mirror, the Guardian, the Telegraph, um, and amongst all this, and then there was some great work done by the Canary and Chronic
mm,
collaboration with Steve Topple and Nicola Jeffrey, who've kind of created a Twitter storm to kind of get this sort of raised more awareness, and thank you to you guys for doing that. Um, so yeah, there was sort of like almost like an avalanche of coverage over the last week, but the BBC in particular seems to have um, been very standoffish in terms of their response, and they seem to have sort of distanced themselves from Giselle and Stephen Bartlett, who was
yeah,
the dragon, the entrepreneur who's invested in the company, and they're basically saying, well, we only just sort of put these people, we give them a platform, but we don't endorse what they're doing. But um, that's not really good enough, is it? Because they, as a public
no,
broadcaster, they've got a responsibility for accurate, to provide accurate information, and
yeah,
that there was very little due diligence in that, and that's the crux of the matter. And also the fact that it appeared that it's come out that, and I think Giselle said herself that um, she was approached by the BBC or by Dragon's Den to actually come
mm,
on the program, and it doesn't feel that that's a natural way that the program should happen. It feels like you should apply to go on the program, and then your application is like taken forwards or not. I don't know if you've got any
yeah.
more.
I in terms of like the application, like it didn't surprise me at all. I've been like approached from, not the BBC, I don't think, but from like
Mm.
various um broadcasters to go on things like sex dates, or naked attraction was also another one which I won't lie, I'd love to do, but I'm not in a relationship. So yeah, I think it didn't surprise me about the approach, but I think what did surprise me is like we said this word due diligence, and for anybody who is listening in a different country who perhaps doesn't have this, the state broadcaster essentially,
Mm,
where we're paying our license fee and they have this really, important role to uphold media standards, and essentially every other broadcaster and publisher should, in theory, look up to them. They've not researched, and I think while there are some programs that the BBC produce that have absolutely got small teams, a few researchers, etc., etc., I think there is no denying that the Dragon's Den team, because it's such a huge prime time program, is massive. And that, will have gone through things like the researchers who initially approached as well. It'll have then gone through basically the casting, deciding who to have on. So more people reading this, more producers making decisions about who's going to go on, what the angle's going to be, how are they going to present this, what the script essentially is going to be, right? Um,
mm,
and then that'll then get put in front of, the dragons themselves, when it's all filmed. And when it's all filmed, there are people there, like camera people, and there are, like I said, so many producers and lighting people and runners. And basically, a lot of people work on this show.
mm,
And a lot of people in post-production will be putting the show together, will be editing it. And not one person, it appears, has kind of piped up and said this whole Emmy thing doesn't sit right. This line, this heavily implied concept that AccuSeeds cure Emmy just doesn't feel ethical. And if they have, it's not been taken into account. So there are either multiple people who have this responsibility within the BBC to have raised these issues, or there are a smaller amount of people within the BBC and BBC Studios who produce Dragon's Den who have perhaps, had these questions raised, or they've thought about them, or they've heard them from their colleagues. Should we be doing this? Is this the right thing? And they've not listened to it. And obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly how it came to be. And I think what all of this massively shows us is, number one, just hire more disabled journalists, more disabled broadcasters, be more accommodating. But
mm,
also, and this is the thing that I always say whenever I go into, a broadcaster, a publisher, if I do talks at a big kind of corporate company just around disability awareness in general, I'll always say, do you know what? Like, drop me an email. And if you've got any questions, if you're not
mm,
sure about what the right use of language is, or can we say this, or do you think the general consensus within the community is this for you? Drop me an email, and if it's a quick, yes or no response, I'll reply immediately. If it's something that I think you should be paying me for, then I am available as a consultant, right? And there are so many disabled people that can, should, will, do act as consultants for things like
mm,
this. And I just think we need to be seeing more of that within our media industry, more representation, but also it's not about treading on eggshells, but it's about having people who understand lived experience. And that is
mm,
so, so vital in having a diverse, inclusive, and also factually correct level of production.
mm. And I think there was an element there of just like shock and surprise on behalf of them people with ME that there was no sort of, or there was very little pushback from the dragons in terms of like asking the questions that needed to be asked in terms of
Mm,
like what is the efficacy of this product, like have there been clinical trials conducted, are you qualified to sell this product, like there was none of that. It felt like I was talking to my wife about it, and we were sort of, she was saying they purely saw it as a business
mm.
issue, and that actually she's sort of kind of you know paying £3 for these things and then selling them for £30. Um,
Yeah, it's a great deal on paper.
so yeah, there's the sort of the flashing kind of money lights effectively,
Yeah.
and that's what they tapped into, and didn't sort of take a step back and sort of look at um the hang on a minute, is this ethical? Should we be questioning this more? And what surprised me is, like, when you watch Dragon's Den, there is so much pushback from the dragons in terms of, well, you haven't thought about this, you haven't planned for this, like, what, like, this is a bad product, or your marketing, or whatever. It felt like there was very little of that, and it was almost like a ringing endorsement from all six of the dragons in terms of sort of their reaction, and that was shown in the fact that they all wanted to invest, and
Yeah, they did. They all were very much up for being a part of it. And if you've ever seen the UK version of Dragon's Den, yeah, they are fierce. I wouldn't want to be on one
mm,
side of them, right? And they do. They question you. Go in as a business and they will pull apart your numbers. But going in as, somebody essentially offering a medical service, where is the scrutiny from that? Where
mm,
is the, okay, well, are you a doctor? Well, no, and she's not. So what training have you had in this?
mm,
And actually Giselle worked at an advertising agency. And even when I'm putting together my Substack newsletter, there is always a disclaimer at the very top, which is like, I'm not a medical professional. What I'm talking about is my lived experience. If, in an emergency, call 999, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just me writing a bunch of words and telling you things, that kind of might make you rest a bit better. But it's not something, I'm not going, here's a product that you need to buy. It's more like, dim the lights, or, you
yeah,
know, create nice Pinterest boards because it
yeah,
might boost your, it's all, it's all things that I go, these things have made me feel better, or these things haven't. And this is how it might impact you. And if I was to go into the den and go, right, I want you to, I want to build this media empire from my newsletter, and we're going to charge, £50 a month subscription from it, and I'm going to be giving out medical grade advice and encouraging people to medically do these things, and yep, it'll cure them. They'd laugh me right out of it. It wouldn't even get to the point of being filmed. And I struggle. I'm really, really, really struggling to understand what it is about Giselle Baltzer and her product that just seemed to blindside everybody into
mm,
believing it. She's clearly, talented, working in a top advertising agency. She's clearly got a solid marketing head. But I think, as most people will be aware, when it comes to things like advertising and marketing, the very nature of it is to be manipulative, right? And often that's done for good. So charities have whole advertising, huge advertising budgets and marketing budgets, and they are doing that, to get you to donate or to sign up or to get involved in some way to change your thinking. And that's done, for a positive impact. But it can be so dangerous when somebody like this is coming along who is essentially trying to manipulate you into making her and Stephen Bartlett in this case a lot of money, because
mm,
the end point, I think, of any business on Dragon's Den, even if you want to make a huge societal change, you're going in there to ask for money, right? You're going in there and
mm,
saying, if you give me £50,000, I am here to tell you my product is so good, my business is so good, that I'm going to turn over all this money for you, and we're both going to make a lot of money out of it. And it just doesn't sit right that the BBC can allow just something so incredibly dangerous with no scientific backup, and with no care about the quite literally millions of people who have ME, about how it's going to make them feel, where I
mm,
don't know what they expected. Did they
mm,
think that when that was broadcast, we'd all go, oh, congratulations, BBC. You have finally found the cure for ME. We all love you. We're gonna go and absolutely praise you all over social media and pay, 10 times our license fee because we just think you're that brilliant. And we're gonna then go and buy Giselle's product in the bucket load, and we're all gonna be cured and blah 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 blah. And it's just there's been no sort of going, this might have worked for Giselle, this might have worked for this one person, right? And if it did, great, congratulations. But what about the millions of people that are going to be seeing this? How is it going
Mm,
to make them feel? Is it going to excite them? Or in the case that it was because they didn't have enough due diligence, they didn't have enough lived experience, they didn't fact check it, for example, they didn't, contact the charity as far as we know to say, can we run this by you? You're left with, I keep kind of coming back to this word, outrage.
mm, and I think it's like mentioned earlier. It's the damage to individuals with ME in terms of like, I mean, I got two people messaging me that not saying have you tried the ear seeds, but just sort of like messaging me about the people that don't have ME, friends that just sort of
Mm,
said, "Oh, have you seen this?" Um, and and one of them was actually I was linked on or tagged on, I think, the Dragon's Den video that they put out on Facebook or whatever about the
mm,
like right at the beginning. It was like the next morning sort of thing,
yeah,
and I just sort of put a comment sort of saying this is really damaging, and I think they were like then quite surprised and sort of taken aback, going, "Oh, hang on a minute, yeah," and but so many people have been sort of contacted by friends, relatives, acquaintances, sort of saying, "Oh, did you see this? How?" And then it brings up the issue of then having to, like you said, I think in the article, having to expend energy and sort of like uh, sort of just finding strength to then explain ME again from scratch almost in terms
yeah,
of like, this is what we're experiencing, this is why. And I think what you made your point so clear, and other people have in on social media and in news articles, is around that lack of understanding. And if this was cancer or if it was another condition, this wouldn't have got anywhere near the TV screens. And I think that's what feels so exhausting and so devastating, I think, for many of us, when we've lived with the stigma of ME for so long, and the misconceptions within society around the psychologization of it, and then it sort of plays into that, doesn't it? And that's what's sort of
massive.
so exhausting to have to deal with.
I think, yeah, I was the same. I'm sure thousands of people were who got messages, just have you seen this? And there was a GP who tweeted me, I think earlier this week and said, I've already had a couple of patients say to me who've got ME, should I be using these things? Are they any good? And that's really, really dangerous. And I think a lot of the time people are well-meaning when we do have friends and family who said, "Oh, have you seen this? Have you checked it out?" Because if they, even have some level of familiarity with us and our condition, some of those people will have seen us that are actually worse than we are. In my case, kind of crashing and crying on the floor, and and it's awful, and it breaks my family's hearts, and I'm so just grateful for how supportive they are. But
Mm,
they are also desperate for you to live a well life as well.
mm,
So I think that was part of the thing of just this rush of people, just it drawing attention, but in a negative way, and then having to go and say, these are the reasons I categorically know that won't work. B, if it does, it needs, more research. And then you just get into, like I said, a conversation, whether it's over text, voice note, in person. And actually, what you just want to go is, do you know what? I can't be bothered. I shouldn't have
mm,
to be going through this because A, as a society, we should be past the point of not understanding nanny for what it is. And B, we just shouldn't ever have to kind of feel like we're being duped into believing what a lot of people have called snake oil in
mm,
terms of, holistic products, which is, you know, some people have views on that, some people don't. Um, and yeah, and that is really tiring. I think what is really easy to forget is what we're on, like 2024. So the 80s before I was born, so they were very useful. Uh, the ME wasn't a thing, right? I mean, it absolutely existed.
Mm.
People absolutely had it in their droves, but it was around the time when it was called yuppie flu, and it was
Yeah.
just like, and actually even the concept of graded exercise therapy and CBT as a way to cure ME. So you essentially increase your exercise more and more each day, even though so many patients, were coming back and going, this is making me worse. But that's only been taken out of the nice guidelines the last couple of years.
Mm.
So as a society, we've really, like, sometimes I think when you're in the bubble of being in the ME community and having ME, you can think, oh yeah, people get this, it's understood. But it really isn't, I think, as a
Mm.
wider society. It's not as known about. I think we've had the kind of introduction of long COVID, and I think that has definitely opened up, a conversation about crippling fatigue and kind of long-term chronic illness and what that might look like or feel like or whatever. But it's still not made those boundaries where we can go in to see a GP and we know no matter what GP we see across the country, they're all going to have an understanding and be sympathetic in the same way they would be
Mm.
if I went in and gone, right, I've broken my leg, or
Mm.
I've got a chronic kidney infection. And I think it was last year I was in hospital and I was ill, and there was a doctor, and I'd say she was, I don't know, fairly like young, like under 30, and I said, going through a medical history, I was like, I've got ME, and she was like, she said, how do you spell that? And I went, well, like the myalgic, the long Latin word, and she was like, ME, and I was like, she's like, is it EMMY? And I was like, no, it's literally dot E,
Yeah.
M
Yeah.
dot E, like the initials. It's stands for this Latin word, or and it's similar to chronic fatigue syndrome. And she looked really baffled, as if she'd never. And I had to go long COVID, which to me, Emmy and long COVID are quite different. Um, for that to kind of trigger and go, oh yeah, okay, sure, And that was somebody who was relatively young and a medical
Mm.
practitioner in our hospitals, and that was quite scary because I think it is changing now. But only when you train to be a doctor in the UK isn't on the syllabus, right?
Yeah.
So this thing that's impacting millions of people around the world that there's no cure for isn't on the syllabus, and if there was a type of kind of chronic liver disease, right, that had blighted so many people's lives to the point that people are seeking out assisted dying measures, or other really heroic things of quite literally dying from it, or they're so severe they can't stand the touch of their partner, or light or sound, or any of these
Mm.
things that make life so beautiful, you know, then it would be so known about and so discussed and so scrutinized medically and in society. But for some reason, because I think people just go, oh yeah, I feel tired too, or yeah, after a long day my feet hurt, as well. There's just been so much medical gaslighting, and I think
Mm.
the danger with the Dragon's Den episode is that it felt like the BBC were gaslighting us, right? It felt like the
Mm.
BBC were going, yeah, okay, we're this massive broadcaster. We should know about the ins and outs of really important health stuff, but we're just going to ignore all that and make this a form of entertainment for the masses.
Mm.
Um, that's pretty sad, I think. I On the flip side, what I really hope is happening, and I'm partly campaigning for this kind of myself in terms of the articles I'm pitching now and the secret projects I'm working on behind the scenes to do with ME. Um, is trying to turn this conversation around. So we are 8 days out from the Dragon's Den episode airing, and we've now seen the news stories. Okay, we've now had the letters go in from these fantastic organisations. There's been a lot going on in the last 8 days. I think what we should now be focusing on is what can society, what can the media industry learn from this? And I think
Mm.
this conversation is massive. Like anybody, I was talking to my nail tech yesterday, and we got on about the Dragon's Den. She was like, yeah, I heard about that. And that's somebody with, as far as I know, like no experience of ME. It's reached mass society across the
Mm.
UK now. And I think it can, will, and should start opening up those conversations more. And it doesn't have to come from you or me, because like we've kind of said, that's exhausting. But if it can open a door when what we've experienced has just been pretty, harsh over the last week or so, if it can open the door to more conversations with workplaces, friends, family, acquaintances, more people understanding what we're going through, then we can get a positive from this.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we have to kind of look for the positives in some ways, because I think it is so um we feel the emotional effects of which then affect us kind of like physically as well, with kind of like stress, and it feels exhausting, and dealing with it. But I think you've unpacked the wider issues in terms of like really well, in terms of how um there needs to be a more concerted effort for ME to be recognised within society, and I think it's one thing that somebody flagged up was the need for like just basic stuff like the NHS websites kind of like ME kind of page. It
Mm.
still talks about tiredness, and and
Yeah.
and it's not tiredness. And I think that's what plays into this sort of thing about, oh yeah, I get tired as well. And people, I'm sure many people with ME have had that sort of comment said to them when you try to explain ME. Oh yeah, I get tired. And it's like, no, this
Yeah.
isn't the reality. This is extreme exhaustion. Or it's like, you and I are both sort of expending energy right now having this conversation that we'll probably both kind of like be impacted by for the next couple of days,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know. But
Yeah.
th-
Absolutely.
that's the reality of it. But we're doing this because it's important. And there is that sort of the wider sort of issues around how ME is perceived. And I think one comment, or there was a few comments on Twitter around thanking the ME organisations for working well together, and and
Mm.
and and doing that joint work, which is much needed. And I think so often it feels like there's kind of like tension maybe there between different ME organisations, or there's not often a sense of a joint approach. And I think that's needed so much more now, in terms of um, kind of stepping off the back of this issue, which has been deeply damaging. But also we've had some good media coverage as well, particularly um, the like the article in the Mirror today,
Yeah.
the by Ellie Fry, and she talks about her mother that's got ME. Things like that, we need sort of more awareness, and I think it's really important. So it would be great to sort of see um, some sort of positives come out of this as well, hopefully, over the sort of like weeks and months ahead. Yeah, definitely. And I think this sort of the focus needs to be on the lack of treatment pathways, and the medical neglect, and the gaslighting, and the misrepresentation, and and the ME needs to be seen in the same light as so many other conditions that get more media attention, and they get more funding for research, and they get more um, sympathy, empathy. I don't know if those are the right words,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I think as well, what is a big part of having, I mean, no matter where you are on the scale, from mild to very severe, is that there's an element of grieving, right? Because
mm,
you are absolutely not able to be that version of yourself you were before any altered you. And there's that is kind of really difficult to live with on a daily basis. And like everybody, for me, some days are worse than others. Some days I will look where I was 7 years ago and go, wow, I had so much energy. I was
mm,
earning X amount of money more than I am now. I was climbing the career ladder, going out, every night to the whatever it was. Why can't I do that now? Or I'll look my boyfriend who works as a magazine editor, and he'll go out to the office, and because we're in a similar field, I'll go, I wish I could be doing that. And then he'll, if it's light enough outside, come home and do an hour's gardening or whatever it might
Mm.
be. Like, it baffles me how I once had that degree of energy, and how that was my life. And I think with the conversations opening up now, I think it's less a kind of about anybody going, oh, bless you, poor thing, and more just about going, hey, is there any way I can make this better? You know, is there anything I can do to make your
Mm.
next hour, your next day, the year ahead of you just a little bit better? And that could be, a medical practitioner who might go like, oh yeah, do you know of an article I could read about lived experience of it so they can understand it deeper? Or it might be a family member going, do you know what? I can kind of it all is clicking together now, and I can see how many people are suffering, and I can see that is, hurting your bones to sit up or walk to the bathroom or whatever it
Mm.
might be. Can I, pop to the corner shop and grab that pint of milk for you, whatever it might be? So yeah, I think the next, going into February, going into the spring, it's going to be really interesting, and I don't want the conversation to stop. Like,
Mm.
personally, I'd love a couple of days just like lying in silence in the dark. I'm absolutely exhausted. Do not push yourself like I am, and no doubt you are as well. Don't do that. But I don't want the conversation to stop because I think I just want something negative like the BBC's coverage, like the Dragon's Den incident with Giselle, to open paths and just be spun round into something that has a positive impact on us? Is it a case of people, understanding that, okay, do you know what, when I do that next 5K, I'm going to do it for somebody like the ME Association
Mm.
because, it affects my cousin or whatever it might be. It's these small things that, if as a society, we can do in tiny increments, even if it's making one person with Emmy's life better for 5 minutes, or whether it's donating millions of pounds to research, collectively, that's all going to add up. And
Mm.
ultimately, that is going to create a situation where we can live our most joyous, restful, happy lives. And I think one thing that's kind of just reminded me as I'm saying that is there was something Giselle Boxer put on her Instagram, which was something like, this is how I went from, housebound, bedbound person with ME to business owner, right? One was her like picture, half the picture was her like lying in bed, looking exhausted, like most of us with ME do. And the other one was bright and cheery and smiling and happy. And
Mm.
actually, that really jarred with me because I was like, number one, I have ME and I'm a business owner. And there are
Mm.
so many people out there who are, define success, but incredibly successful in the business world or whatever it might be, who also live with ME. And also, I'm sat in front of you, and I've got, a bit of makeup on, and my hair has been washed in the last few days. But catch me on a different day, and it'll look
Mm.
completely different. It doesn't always look the same.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, you can and should and deserve to live a well-rested life full of daily joy in your life, and let's just hope that, the world as a result of the Dragon's Den issue can start to understand a little bit more.
Mm. Definitely. Yeah, it's been really good to talk. I was going to ask you about kind of like your own ME story and about kind of your path into journalism and stuff like that, and we sort of dove straight into the Dragon's Den issue. But do you,
We
do you
do.
do you want to tell us a little bit about your blog, and particularly in your writing, and where we can find you and things
Yeah.
like that?
So I grew up in County Durham, don't have the accent. All my family is still there. They're incredible, and it was very like working class family. Both my parents went out and kind of worked and really encouraged me to go after what I want to do. I'm so grateful for that. And what I want to do was write. So I've got like a pile of books behind me. If anybody's kind of watching the visual version of this podcast. And I just used to read loads, and I used to read a lot of like Jacqueline Wilson and teen magazines. I wanted my name on the magazine masthead, you know. To me, that was like the definition of not only cool, but I felt like I could write, and I was like, I'm not bad at this. I'm doing all right in English class. Um, yeah, maybe I can swan off to London and be like Harry Bradshaw, because that was very much the reference point for what journalism was kind of back when I was 13, 14, 15, whatever age. Um, and I was just, yeah, I was really lucky. I think that I, I mean, I've worked hard. Like, luck does come into it, but I also worked blooming hard. And I kind of was freelancing from around the age of 17, 18, because I just wasn't afraid to put myself out there and go, hey, I'm here. I've got these opinions, I've got these ideas, which I think are really going to benefit your audience. It takes a lot of balls to do that, and I'm now coming up to 35, and I look back and I'm just like, wow, you know, who was that? Like she was fiery. Um, and throughout my career, I did go to university. I studied fashion communication, and again, while I was doing that, I was in Nottingham. I was interning and freelancing for the Nottingham Post, so just constantly writing, getting paid to write. I was at the age of where social media was kind of just coming about, and I was
Mm.
quite savvy with that type of stuff. I think being a millennial, and I would then go, do you know what? Like, you don't know how to launch a Twitter account for, you know, your website, your newspaper, whatever, but I do. Can I do this for you? You know, can I do this for you in exchange for like whether it be, I don't know, like products or services, or money. Um, and yeah, and that progressed kind of, and then throughout my career, I've worked uh, in social media and journalism in audience development. I was senior editor at Global, who owned things like Capital FM and Heart, and that was a lot of fun. Um, and then, long story short, I was living in London. I was 27. I was working as an audience development editor for Beano, which again, a lot of fun. Uh, it was great vibes. And I got whacked with meningitis and sepsis, essentially overnight, nearly died. Long story short, um, couldn't walk again because a lumbar puncture went wrong.
Mm.
Um, and was recovering from that and had to leave my job, my home, and everything. And was recovering, and for some reason meningitis found me again 3 months on, and I got another
Mm.
bout of meningitis. And I think when you, for me, like like coming back to ME, it doesn't surprise me at all that I ended up with ME, because two lots of meningitis is gonna do something to your brain,
Mm.
right? Um, and I feel like I was really lucky. I had an understanding GP who, I think we often talk about the difference between post-viral fatigue syndrome, and ME, but I think, you know, in some cases, like there wasn't mine, there's a clear pathway between the two. One is maybe initially diagnosed as post-viral fatigue, and then you go, oh, actually, this is ME caused by, I think in my case, it was both kind of the viruses and sepsis, but also probably just burnout as well. Um, yeah, and then from then on, I very quickly, you know, my whole identity pretty much at that age centered around my work. And
Mm.
I was like, right, I'm going to start freelancing, because if I'm having these problems, for example, on trains with a wheelchair user as a disabled person, other people are too. And I had a little bit of a platform, a couple of thousand followers on social media and contacts in the media industry. So I was pitching to places like The Guardian, Grazia magazine, Cosmopolitan, all these different places who I feel grateful that they took a valid interest in kind of wanting solid lived experience disability journalism. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5.5, coming up to 6 years, is
Mm.
in varying degrees freelancing, on and off for publication reasons, Times, The Telegraph, um, all these different places around disability, around ME, around things like I've documented kind of the fact I learned how to walk again. And then I'm also been doing like I did a talk at Prima Donna Festival last year, which was amazing. And I've done a couple like corporate talks around disability as well. And I think any advice to anyone who wants to get into writing professionally about their disability, about life with ME, is like you don't have to sell your trauma for it to be valid. You don't have to
Mm.
lay out like every medical detail,
Mm.
because actually, you have every right to keep that private, but also just talking about things, if it is music like we've seen with Dragon's Den, what's your spin on the news? What's your opinion on how these things are coming about? Or if you do want to, be writing opinion pieces, do you have another niche? So, for example, like if you're interested in fashion, can you pitch stories around accessible clothing companies and that type of thing? So yeah, I always just think go for it, contact us on social media, subscribe to newsletters like Sean Meets Williams, and that'll kind of give you a list essentially of like who's looking for commissions, and
Mm.
um, who's looking for pictures. So yeah, briefly, very briefly, that was my journalism like overview. And yeah, and life with ME, and then the end of last year, I launched my Substack. It's completely free. Um, and I think that came from a place where I was like, do you know what? It's been 5+ years. I'm actually in a place of understanding my illness, and accepting it is a massive deal. And it takes some people a week, and it takes some people will never get there. So
Mm.
I think for me, I'm all about living a balanced, like happy life with any, right? So if there's a cure tomorrow, a legitimate cure, then fabulous. Let's, sign me up. Let's go for
Mm.
it. I will go back to working 5 days a week in an office environment, going to the pub every night, XYZ, right? But right now, that's not the case. So I think with my newsletter, it's kind of my story of going, this is how I live beautifully and slowly in a society which actually places your value and your worth on things like how many hours you're working and how much money you're making, and
Mm.
and where your social standing is because of how big your house is or whatever it might be.
Mm.
And it's for me a big part of the healing process of stripping that back and going, I'm not going to apologize for enjoying the things I do, and I'm also not gonna place my worth on how much tax money I make the government, for example. Um, I'm gonna place my worth in life on how much my friends and family love me, and if I've had
Mm.
a positive impact on the disability or any community. So yeah, I think for me that's kind of what my newsletter is about in that sense. And yeah, I hope it kind of will help people to just, I don't know, just breathe a sigh of relief and go, oh, do you know what? Yeah, I can live with this because it's not gonna go away. Like, and let's just kind of work with what we've got.
Mm. Yeah, so Slow Living with Emmy is the Substack. And yeah, I'll put a link in the description. You can go and subscribe to that, and then you get an email that lets you know when new sort of issues have been new versions. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, publish. Yeah, like uploaded.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, new
Oh wow.
copies. Yeah. So yeah, it's good. I enjoyed reading it this morning actually, and
Oh,
I was thinking about making parsnip soup, so that would be that's
oh,
yeah, that's
oh, it is a good
it's
one.
something to think about. So yeah, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
What I was thinking was it might be it might be good to kind of like do this again in a few months' time and sort of almost to like review where things have gone, if things have gone
Mm.
anywhere, with kind of, maybe sort of societal kind of awareness or, ME awareness generally. And just to catch up because I think it's been a really good conversation and thank you. And yeah, people please do comment and if you're watching on YouTube, do send us like emails if you've got kind of thoughts about what we've discussed in this episode because it is such a emotive issue, and I think what I would like to say is like people just to kind of take time out over the next few days, couple of weeks, just to rest as much as possible and yeah, find ways to sort of like not get so drawn into the emotional side of things because we need to protect ourselves as well, don't we, as people with ME from this sort of like the trauma, I guess, in terms of what it feels like to experience what's gone on over the last week. So yeah, I hope everybody listening can find time to rest and invest in things that give you peace. I guess is
Yeah.
a good way of putting it. So
Yeah, in my case, I'm gonna block my football club on social media, I think, because that does not give me peace.
yeah, yeah. I've also felt very frustrated this week with the football, but we'll find out what happens tomorrow. Yeah. So
Mm.
yeah, it's been good, and thanks for your time, and we'll hopefully
Thank
speak
you.
again.
Thank you. Bye.